Boker Tov, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. I'm Rabbi Enid later. I'm the Rabbi Emerita at Beth Israel West Temple. And I've been here a few times, and it's always wonderful to be back. Pardon me. Our core portion this week is Ve'ethan and includes a restatement of the Ten Commandments as well as the central statements of the Shema. And what I thought we would do this morning is begin with chapter 5 to end the book of Deuteronomy to review the statement of the Aseret Dibrot, the Ten Commandments, 10 utterances, and then go on to the Shema and V'ahavta. And then I have, as usual, a hefty handout for us to make our way through to take a deep dive into the Shema and the paragraphs that follow it in a prayer service. And that's based on the book Weaving Prayer, an analytical and spiritual commentary on the Siddur by one of my rabbinical school teachers, Rabbi Jeffrey Hoffman, who is a JTS grad and has spent much of his research over many years on the prayer book and the prayers and helping to make them more accessible to the prayers. And so we begin with a blessing for engaging with words of Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kadeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe. You have made us holy with your mitzvot and have commanded us to engage with words of Torah. So let's, we begin in the Eitz Chaim. We're on page 1015, Deuteronomy chapter 5. And we'd like to do some reading. And let's see, Sheila, do you have that in front of you? Do you want to start today?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Moses summoned all the Israelites and said to them, "Hear, O Israel, the law and rule that I proclaim to you this day. Study them and observe them faithfully. The Lord our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. It was not with our fathers that the Lord made this covenant, but with us, the living, every one of us who is here today. Face to face, the Lord spoke to you on the mountain out of the fire. I stood between the Lord and you at that time to convey the Lord's words to you. For you were afraid of the fire and did not go up to the mountain, saying."
Okay, thank you. And let's pause there. So what is Moses? So remember that the Israelites are camped on the eastern side of the Jordan River. We're ready to go into the promised land. Moses will not be going with his people. And the book of Deuteronomy is basically 3 speeches of Moses, basically saying you're going off to college. These are the things that you need to remember. And because I won't be able to be there with you. And otherwise saying you're going off to this land and you're going to need to create a society for yourselves. And so all these rules, these mitzvot, these laws are going to help you and guide you to be the best people as a group you can be, and the best person as an individual that you can be. What is so interesting about this preamble to the second iteration of the Ten Commandments? Did you, as Moses is telling the people this, did anything jump out at you as, this is interesting?
For one thing, it's Moses that is speaking to the people. You see, it's not so much God, but Moses.
Right. Moses is doing all the talking.
Right, he's doing all the talking. So the initiative is assumed by Moses now. And that is in contrast to, all the other books where God is commanding.
Sure.
Now Moses is commanding.
Sure, that's right, that's right. Moses is, it's kind of like it's Deuteronomy, the second telling, right? Mishneh Torah, a second Torah. This is the Reader's Digest version, right? Of everything that has come before, plus more, but it's through Moses's words, right? Okay, yes,
The other thing is that he's speaking to the new generation. That those that, have come through the wilderness. The older generation pretty much has died off.
right,
And so that's what makes it necessary to repeat these laws, because these people, perhaps the younger generation, were not at Sinai.
right, exactly. They weren't, yes, go ahead.
I just found the whole thing interesting because Moses has the speech impediment supposedly. And because his brother Aaron who had to speak for him
Uh-huh.
at the Pharaoh. So it's interesting that he would take all this time to speak when he can't speak. So
Exactly right. When we meet Moses at the burning bush, God just tells Moses, go talk to Pharaoh. Oh, no, I can't.
That's right.
I can't, I have this,
Yeah.
I can't make the words, right? And here, a whole book
Yes.
of Moses speaking. So it's amazing. He has found his voice.
Guess so.
Well,
Right,
when you
he
feel
has found his
confident,
voice.
when you feel confident, and anybody would stutter when they start out. They don't know what they're saying. Now he knows what he's saying,
Right,
and so he can blurt it out.
right, exactly, exactly. I think we have a president who has overcome
Yes.
his speech difficulties, right?
Yeah.
And, to lead a
John
country.
Glenn overcame it, or his
Right.
wife. I think it was his wife.
Right, exactly. But also, the idea is that Moses is talking to this next generation. Your ancestors were there at Horeb, which is another name for Sinai. You weren't, but it is as if you were there too. So what does that mean for us? Right? That means that each and every one of us is as if we stood at Sinai as well and received those words and entered into this covenant with God. Okay,
There's a bitterness there too. Moses knows that he will not get to see the promised land.
that's right,
He'll only from afar.
exactly. There's a bitterness, and it's reflected in the beginning of our tour, which we didn't start with, because that would definitely take too long. But you're exactly right. He's telling me, I can't go with you, but these are the things that you need to know. Great, thank you. So let's continue with this second iteration. I'm sorry, I don't know people's names, and Sheila, the gentleman sitting next to you, Bob, if you could continue reading. So we're on chapter 5, verse 6.
Yeah.
I, the Lord, am your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods beside me. You shall not make for yourself a sculptured image, any likeness of what is in the heavens, above or on the earth below, or in the waters below the earth. You shall not bow down to them to serve them. For I, the Lord, your God, am an impassioned God, visiting the guilt of the parents upon the children, upon the third and upon the fourth generations of those who reject me. But showing kindness to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandment.
So
That's a weird thing that he's skipping over a whole group of people. Okay. You're nothing. But the future generations, but he forgets that they are the ones who are going to transmit this, even if they don't obey it. They didn't leave books for them then.
right. I'm sorry, so Sheila, I'm sorry, explain to me what you're saying.
I'm saying that he says he's going to skip over the third, fourth generation. He's visiting the guilt of the parents upon the
He's skipping.
children, upon the third and upon the fourth generation
Right.
of
the
those who
children of the
reject me,
second.
but showing kindness to the 1,000th generation of those who love me. So in other words, and then now that I reread it, it's, yeah. If you love me, I will go with you forever.
Right.
If you don't love me, you know,
There is no skipping, it's, you know.
There's no
Yeah.
skipping.
There's no
Yeah,
But
I
there
was
is
just-
there is a conflict though, because say 7 generations ago, somebody loved them,
Uh-huh,
and it goes to the 1000th generation, but somebody in between didn't, and it goes to the 3rd generation. You now have a conflict between
yeah,
observing, I don't know what the word is.
so I,
So which one takes precedence?
sure, so I, pardon me. I'm so sorry. I would say that that this will be okay. When stuff happens, there will be consequences. I don't know that Moses and God at Sinai are setting it up for, from this moment on, and I'm gonna keep track of the generations, but from this moment on, for those that are, show kindness and fidelity, I will be there. And when they don't, there will be consequences. And I don't know that we can say that, oh, but we're in a good year now, or we're about,
Yeah,
I don't know that that's gonna work. I think basically what Moses is saying here is that there's consequences, right? When you do the right thing, things are going to move forward, and I'm there for you, and I will show kindness to you. It's, I think that it's difficult to think that God is going to be a punishing God, especially from one generation to the next, and the next. And the Bible responds to this. And ultimately, I believe it's in Ezekiel, that it's going to say that, or Jeremiah, that people are responsible for their own sins. And it's not going to go from one generation to the next. But none of this, 3rd and 4th generation. But we're going to do, everyone is responsible for their own stuff. When
But,
Okay.
but nevertheless, there is that famous saying, I don't remember in what book of the Chumash,
Uh-huh,
it is famous saying that Nosei Avon Lebanim.
right, so that's in
It's very
Shemot,
famous.
right? Okay, so and that's what this is. That's what this is. So it's part of our tradition, but it's not an unchanging tradition. So although it comes back up in the high holy days, especially, right? Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, right? When God presents God's self to Moses, and this is, the same text is here to the passing, pardon me, visiting guilt upon the 3rd and 4th generation by showing kindness to the 1,000th. And it's, what's the point here? What's the point of this? Why would God be saying this? Why would Moses be saying this?
At,
Okay,
at the same time, there is also the concept of Zchut Avot.
yes, the
That's-
merits of our fathers.
So it goes both ways.
Yes, right, because don't take it out on us so much. Remember our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? Go ahead.
Maybe it has to do with if the parents are committed and they honor God and they do the right things, and the right values will be transmitted to the next generation. And if not, the next generation will not have the benefits of living according to the covenant. And they'll suffer in effect. It's not so much about guilt, but the failure to transmit, which will have a deleterious effect on the children and the grandchildren.
Sure,
Is that possible?
sure.
There's probably some commentaries along.
So I
those
think
lines.
that there's wonderful commentary on this that will be in chapter 6.
Okay.
V'shinata levanecha dibarta bam. Teach these things to your children, right? Teach them diligently, repeat them and repeat them and repeat them. Because we're not gonna be born with a special Torah gene that tells us all these things, right? We're born from parents who are going to it's their responsibility, it's the community's responsibility to teach the next generation so that they'll know, and then they will teach so that the next will know. Exactly, great. Let's continue. We're on 5:11, Deuteronomy 5:11. And
Nelson got it.
Nelson, did you have a comment?
Thank you. It seems to me that parents sometimes think that to protect their children, they're not going to do certain things. I'll make an example. Like, so I can have as much money as possible for my children, I won't give to charity. But in doing that, we actually harm them. That if you really want to protect your children, you have to do the good things, not just think of yourself or isolate them from the rest of the world.
Sure, thank you. Thank you. By giving tzedakah, you're teaching them. You're teaching them that that's part of your life and that should be part of theirs too. Okay, right, okay. Would you continue reading for us?
Okay. You shall not swear falsely by the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not clear one who swears falsely by his name.
Okay, what would be and we'll just pause for a second, but why shouldn't we take God's name in this way?
But it looks like there is a consequence if one does that.
Right? There will be punishment, but why shouldn't God's name be associated with something that's false?
Of God's name, Lasham. As it called, for no reason.
For no reason,
Good.
right? For no
Yeah,
good
that's the
reason,
idea.
right? Right? The idea, that it doesn't even come out of my mouth. There's something wrong with what I just said, right? Should the name of God be associated with something that is not correct, that is false, swearing falsely, right? That's, you don't put the two together, because what am I doing if I swear falsely? If I don't use God's name correctly in this way? I'm demeaning God's name. I'm demeaning God. And that's no, that should not be done.
That's what they use in a courtroom.
Right,
They swear.
exactly. Put your hand on the Bible, God bless them. Yes, right? Right, that's where it comes from. Please continue.
There is a power in God's name. If you invoke God's name in prayer, to believe in the power of that prayer. So, if you don't do it correctly, you need to bring the value of
Sure, thank you. Sure. Well,
Observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy.
okay, so let's stop right there just for a second, because we should look here. It says Shamor et Yom HaShabbat Lakodsho. And in Exodus chapter 20, it says Zachor, right? And Yom HaShabbat Lakodsho. So there we have remember, and here we have observe. So, oh, this could be a problem. It's not an exact duplication from the first time. So what do the rabbis teach us? When you sing Lachad Dodi, you get the commentary. Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad.
Exactly the one.
Right? Right?
That's exactly
When God spoke the Ten Commandments, the Aseret HaDibrot, both words came out at the same time, right? Shamor, Zachor and Shamor. And so that the rabbis kind of pull it back together in this way. What's the difference between remembering and observing or guarding, protecting.
You can remember
If you don't-
something and not observe it.
Yeah, one's.
In other words, a lot of Jews will acknowledge, hey, today is the Sabbath,
Shabbat.
but they're not gonna do a darn thing about it.
Right, it's similar to do as I say, not as I
Right.
do.
Right. Right. Very
On the
true.
other hand, if you don't remember it, you can keep it.
Right, that's true too, right? You go on autopilot, right?
So the whole proceed from.
Uh-huh, that's right, beautiful. That's a lovely interpretation. Zachor precedes Shamor, because if you don't remember it, then you can't do it. Think of the, they're called crypto Jews, who pass traditions from one to the next to the next. We light candles on Friday night. We haven't the slightest idea why we do this, but we do it, right? As opposed to it's Shabbat. We make Shabbat with the lighting of candles and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they go together. Please continue.
6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your ox or your ass, or any of your cattle, or the stranger in your settlements, so that your male and female slave may rest as you do. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God freed you from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day.
So why remember that we were slaves?
Want to be treated the same way that we were treated.
So that
Right, remember, you know, more compassionate.
Right, exactly. Yes,
So a slave is completely subject to whoever the master is. The master in Egypt isn't going to let you observe Shabbat. And on the other hand, if we are the subjects of Hashem and God says observe Shabbat, that's what we should do.
that's what you should do, right? But the idea is that we should, not only us, but those who work for us. And not only the humans that work for us, but the animals that work for us as well.
Right.
This is a tremendously kind and thoughtful mitzvah, but it also gives regard to just this idea of work is not good for any living thing, right? That one needs to rest, one needs to rejuvenate themselves. Yes.
Yeah, this version of Shabbat, as opposed to creation, is about redemption.
Mhm.
Okay, we were redeemed from slavery in Egypt, so it's about freedom. Freedom not only for yourself, but everyone in your family, your community. So it's a difference between creation and redemption, the
Yes.
two versions.
Yes, for sure, for sure. We meet Shabbat at the in Bereshit, right? When
Right.
God rested on the Sabbath day and blessed it and called it holy, sanctified it. But that was then. But this is this idea of remembering what it means to be able to celebrate Shabbat in freedom. Right?
I wonder if there is any commentary, knowledge about a day of rest in other countries.
So remember the book, and I can't remember the author's name, but The Gifts of the Jews,
Yeah,
and this is one of them. And in ancient, there are texts where the Jews, the Israelites, are seen as lazy because they don't work 24/7. And but at some point in time, this idea of stopping took hold. And certainly in Christians see their day of rest as Sunday.
Right.
Muslims see their day of rest as Friday. God forbid it should be the same day. So everyone has to have a different day, but be that as it may, but at least people are stopping, right?
And the youngsters nowadays don't think that working more than 4 days a week.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh.
If-
Yeah,
They actually have slaves because it says here, so that your male and female slave may rest, they just got out of slavery.
yes,
So that doesn't make sense to me that they would have slaves. Why would they incorporate that in there?
sure. So that's a great,
But they were slaves.
They were slaves,
No,
but
no,
this,
I mean, they
there.
had slaves.
they had slaves.
Absolutely.
The Israelites actually brought with them slaves, even though they were freed from slavery.
Who can become a slave? If somebody stole or own money and cannot give it away, so it's another way of working it out and become a slave.
Those are a
Oh,
little bit different if it's an Israelite or a non-Israelite.
right, so,
Prisoners of war.
Yeah.
oh.
And
I
if
see.
people were in
Okay.
debt, people were in debt and they couldn't pay their debts, they had to work it off. So it was a kind of an indentured slavery as opposed to.
So it
they
wasn't
call-
like a systemic slavery
It
of
wasn't like
people.
the kind of slavery that we had in the South.
It was with the non-Israelite slave. I mean, the prisoner of war was not an Israelite. And if he or she were enslaved, that was a little different.
Right.
And
Right.
it reflects that in the Torah.
right. So
It's still more
it's-
humane than, for whatever it's worth.
Yes, for sure, for sure. So slavery
But it
did
still
exist.
exists.
And because of what we went through, the idea is that we were to treat slaves better and differently and fairer than we knew. And some of those texts were used by rabbis in support of the South during slavery, during the Civil War. So it's part, and then there were others that took the other side, of course, to say no. And so it's something that has been with this part of humanity for quite some time.
But the slaves were not a commodity, they were
They did have
sold,
services of
more
this
like
kind.
you're talking about.
It seems that that there were different categories depending upon how you became a slave or a servant. Right? And either through war, people were brought in, non-Jews, or a Jew that owed money and would sell themselves and work it off, right? And those kinds of
Even
things.
captives, though. Like
Captives,
a-
right.
they Took a captive female.
Yes,
Yeah, I think it's still relevant today, and I think it's so important. When there's people that have billions of dollars and complain about their taxes or, something else with other people. We're all equal, I would think, in some ways, and that's what it's saying here, this isn't just here for me, here for you too, and you have feelings.
right,
I
exactly.
think also in some cultures, people voluntarily offer themselves to be slaves as a way to make a living,
Yes,
as a way to get by in life. Them,
sure,
their families, including their wife and their
sure,
children.
of course,
Let me be your slave.
right. Thank you, yes.
Okay, we always make a big deal about the difference between Zachor and Shamor, but there's more later on in this commandment. The Zachor one talks about creation. The Shamor one talks about redemption from Egypt. Or whatever that's worth.
We have that for Kiddush too.
Right. So
We split
those
it
are
up.
also two differences
Right.
within the two texts.
And I don't know, but I was thinking maybe the reason this is a core is just remember about creation.
Uh-huh,
There's nothing you have to observe about creation. And redemption from Egypt, yeah, there's something you have to do.
You have to do something about nature.
Well, okay. so
I'm just throwing something out. I haven't
yes,
thought it
let's
through.
take a minute,
Yeah, 4:30,
go to
4:46.
446.
You think I wasn't looking at it?
All right. Ah. Okay, so actually it's 4:45 where it begins with Zachor at Yom HaShabbat, the Cook Show. So it says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or daughter, your male or female slave, or your cattle, or the stranger who is within your settlements.
Okay, up to that,
Okay,
up to that point,
point,
except
it's
for
the
Zachor and
same,
Shamor,
right?
it's the same.
Okay?
Or very close to
For
the
pretty
same.
much, right, okay. And then it says, in Exodus, it says in 6 days, Kisheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. For in 6 days, the Lord made heaven and earth and sea and all that is in them. And God rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. And this is, what we say, Al Kain Be'erach Adonai et Yom HaShabbat V'Yakadsheni. Okay, God rested on the Sabbath day and he blessed it and hallowed it. So, and then we just read that, remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God freed you from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. So with the first iteration at Sinai, Moses and God is saying that remember how God rested on the Sabbath day. And this is our model, okay? You could work and then you rest. And the instructions here are, again, you observe because you were slaves. It's just so
Observe
interesting.
In order to remember.
In order to remember, right? How to treat other people. There seems to be as Deuteronomy has in it, and I'm thinking out loud here because this is great to think about. Deuteronomy is really setting up a social system, right? This is the land that we are going to build together. And so in thinking about Shabbat, it becomes a humane reason, a remembering our redemption reason. Remember, and what is redemption but bringing people out, the historical redemption, bringing people out from the narrows of Mitzrayim, the Tsar, right? The narrows of Egypt to freedom. Remember what that was like. So that you can observe in freedom. Whereas the Zachor, the remembrance, this recalls creation and God's role in creation. So the Sinai experience, the Sinai Horeb experience has the connection to God and the connection to creation. And the Deuteronomy Sinai Horeb experience has a connection to history and moving things forward as well. Yes.
It occurred to me also when you said Sinai Horeb, that when everybody's standing at the mountain and experiencing some aspect of God directly, maybe then it does make sense to hear about creation, which is God's. Whereas when Moses is discoursing on the banks of the Jordan, and it's Moses who's talking, and you're about to enter the land, that's when you need to hear about the more human level, maybe.
It's certainly possible. It's, we could talk all morning about it, right? But it's interesting to see it, and thank you very much for pointing it out. Okay. We should move on. Okay, verse 16. Yes, the next person in line to read.
David?
16.
Uh-huh. And
Three.
on page 1020,
Here's 16 right there.
Okay. Honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God has commanded you, that you may long endure and that you may fare well in the land that the Lord your God is assigning to you.
great, thank you. And bring us home with the next, with the last ones.
With the next five.
You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Okay, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, you shall not crave your neighbor's house, or his field, or his male or female slave, or his ox, or his ass, any of your neighbors.
Thank you. And that's number, from our counting, that's number 10. Okay. What's very interesting here, I just include this parenthetically, is that as you can tell, the first 4 really commandments, no matter which version you're looking at, have to do with our relationship with God. And the last 5 have to do with our relationship with each other. And then there's number 5, which talks about honoring your parents, right? And so depending upon, it's very, very interesting. Christian painters in Renaissance time and beyond would show the tablets showing 4 and then 6. Because they put the honor your parents with in the category of between human beings. Jewishly, right, we understand the honoring your parents because of our need to be even, but also this idea that our parents are basically that connection with God, right? And we put it on the God side, the 5 and 5. And it's Rembrandt in his painting of Moses with the 10 Commandments on Sinai that shows the 5 and the 5. And the question is, so why? Because he had a very good friendship with the rabbi in his community. And he influenced the layout, as well as the Hebrew letters show you know how the Torah script will sometimes make elongated letters so that you have the justified columns. So Rembrandt too, elongated script so that the columns are justified. It's just so cool.
We also have to know that a numbering of the commandments is different, including the first 4.
Yes.
And that's one of the objections that the Jews have to putting the 10 Commandments out, because they give a Christian, the Catholics,
list them,
the
right.
Catholics, the Protestants and the Jews, there are 3 different versions.
Right.
So, hopefully they'll never ask for what's the 3rd commandment on it.
Is there a commentary about how verse 16 ties the length of life
Well, that's how kids in.
with respect for your parents?
Mhm.
But that's not.
Thank you. The little note here that's in the commandment to respect one's parents, that's the only one of the commandments that's connected with, and your lives will be extended.
What do they say about the connection? How the two are
How the two?
possibly connected?
Well, by respecting your it doesn't, interestingly, as we know, it doesn't say love your parents. Right? It says respect your parents. And there's a difference between those 2 words, as we will possibly find out. And but the idea is when one respects one's parents, there's a positive, let's see, how shall I say this? For the
implication.
person that takes care of their parents, no matter how they were treated. But make sure that at least they have food, they have a home, shelter, they have clothing, they have the proper medical care. That there is this commandment is suggesting that there is positive consequences for that.
You know, a good word would be is acknowledge them as your parents. And
Right.
Uh-huh, or
In
treat
other
them,
words, but you're right, there's a
but
point
it
where
can
you
be
say,
hard, you know?
I have
because-
to do this because they're my parents.
Right,
So what you're basically doing is acknowledging that you owe something to them, even if they've been horrible to you.
yes, for sure.
They
Yeah.
also are, the parental role is a continuation of the work of creation.
Sure,
So they're continuing God's work.
that's beautiful, right? Yes,
You may not, you may have cause not to love your parents. Your parents may have mistreated you. They may not have been parents worthy of love to you for whatever reason. But still, you need to honor them because that's the first step towards honoring God,
sure,
right? Okay, and that's why this is the fifth commandment. The fifth term in like, what is it, chiasma, is always the most important
uh-huh,
term. The middle term is what all of the others hinge
build up
on.
to. That's beautiful. Great, thank you. Thank you. We need to have 2 hours, you realize this, okay? You just realize this, okay? We're going to, right, we're going to jump over to page 1024, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. I had such wonderful plans for this.
Don't feel bad, everybody's been
It would have been, it could have been a contenta, but that's okay. It'll just mean that I get to come back next year at this time. We'll refocus. Oh, I'll do this on Erev Shavuot. This will be my Tikkun Le'el Shavuot talk for next year. Okay, don't read it. Just come. All right, we're good. Okay, so here we go with what is been called the watchword of Israel's faith, right? The introduction after Moses recalls these mitzvot of the Ten Commandments, he continues, and this is the instruction, the laws and rules that the Lord your God has commanded me to impart to you, to be observed in the land that you're about to cross and occupy, so that you, your children, and your children's children may revere the Lord your God and follow as long as you live all God's laws and commandments that I enjoin upon you, to the end that you may long endure. So that too is connected with long life, right? By doing what we are enjoined upon to do. We should only live long and prosper. Obey, O Israel, willingly and faithfully, that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, spoke to you. And then it continues with Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. I'm sorry, we're back to verse 4. Hear, listen, pay attention, O Israel. Adonai is our God, Adonai Echad. And look at this translation, okay? What does the Hebrew word Echad mean?
One, yes, it means all those things.
Yes, it means one, and it also can be translated as singularly alone. I mean, you could have one of an orange, right? But there are many oranges, but there's this singularity of one.
No, but it's also le'achet from the shoresh to be together.
Be together, and how did, what would that?
So it's not only one, but all Israel are one.
Yes, and Israel
together.
is one too, exactly, which when we gather our tzitzit, at the, towards the end of the blessing, right before reciting the Shema, we say, gather us in peace, right? From amongst the four corners of the land. That's us. That's the people of Israel, gathering us together as one as we prepare to recite the oneness of God. Right? It's a beautiful part of the service because one just leads to the next.
It's interesting that the letter Dalet in the word Echad at the end of verse 4 was much larger than all the other letters.
Yes, and
Oh,
look at that
that's
ayin,
so it
as a matter of
shouldn't be,
fact, at the end of
I
Shema.
don't know why. The ayin, they want to make sure that you don't pronounce it Shema is lest, you know. And echad instead of acher. That there is another God,
Okay,
acher. So we want to say echad, so we make sure you see the dalet and not a resh there.
that's fine, all right.
Right. So
That's
that's
the
one
explanation.
explanation, and
But
that's,
if you
that's
put
a
'em
great
together, you
explanation
get
because
It's a
how
very,
many Hebrew
Aid is
students,
wetness, yeah.
right?
it's a very good
and-
explanation, absolutely, yeah.
Right,
What is the
right.
other explanation?
And the idea of larger letters and what they spell, which you mentioned, the ayin and the dalet spell aid. So each
Oh,
time
okay.
that we recite this,
Oh,
we
very nice.
witness the oneness
meeting
of God.
That's
Okay,
great.
all right?
Interesting.
So the
I know that.
What
the original translation of the Shema in our prayer books and in the JPS translation was echad, meaning
Another
one.
one.
As in the, I think it's the 1917 translation, echad and one. In the 1962 translation, the word is alone.
It's exactly the opposite of le'achad
So
means.
it's interest, so, all right, take a look in your packet, okay?
Sneak preview.
Okay.
Not in one.
It's
Oh.
somebody acted.
Page 5.
Yeah, here it is.
Page 5.
The one with the handwritten two at the bottom talks about one versus alone.
Oh, right, it's actually at the bottom of page 2.
And he says declaration of monotheism versus declaration of loyalty.
Right.
All right, I
Right.
read it in advance.
Right, okay, thank you for that. Okay, so we can read more about it at the bottom of page 2 into the next section. But the idea of echad is monotheism. And that's definitely what we, as of one, is definitely what we associate with the Shema as this declaration of God's oneness. And then as time has gone on, the idea becomes more of this loyalty to God. The idea of monotheism, says Rabbi Hoffman and other commentators, is that it's anachronistic for the time, right? Because think about when we leave Egypt and we cross the sea, across dry land, we get to the other side and we sing, Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Who is like you among the gods, Adonai? Right? So this idea of oneness, there's only one God, really doesn't come until much later. The thought is that the Jews introduced this idea of monotheism and, yes, but not at that time.
In contrast to polytheism.
Right. Certainly in contrast to polytheism, right. And yet, so it then gets translated as alone of all that might be out there. And let's face it, there are people of various faiths and traditions all around the world. But it's this Yud He Vav He, Adonai as we pronounce those letters, that is our God. And our God alone, no one else.
And
Yes.
And also that, I'm sure you have in here too, the idea of Shema listen, that we're a hearing culture rather than, we should depend on hearing rather than seeing. You can't see God. You
That's
only
very
hear God.
Yes,
If
for
you
sure.
listen, and the word Shema has so many different meanings. It can't be translated into any other language because it means to understand, to internalize, to
Right.
respond,
Ishma,
right? All of these
Right, for all that
different
it means, right?
connotations. And Jonathan Sachs makes this, a contrast with Hellenism, with the Greeks, a visual culture,
Sure,
okay, architecture, theater, all of the visual things. And Judaism is about hearing and listening. And so much is written on that topic. Athens versus Jerusalem, so many people, and that's the main distinction that they make.
excellent, thank you. Yes.
So when I read this, what I wanted to struggle with is whether these are really mutually exclusive. And he even admits in the last sentence, however, Levinson himself makes clear, et cetera, of this section, that Levinson, on whom he's relying, isn't totally comfortable with making this distinction absolute. So I thought to myself, what's the value of the distinction, at least from a historical perspective? And I think it might be in the difference between ourselves and the other so-called Abrahamic religions, which are, we are not triumphalist, and if you will, they are. In other words, if this is God, everybody better believe this is God, or there's something wrong with them. We, maybe because despite the fact that we might not have been able to be counted any more than the sands of the sea, we're still smaller than most everybody else around us. And oh, by the way, they were all polytheists and had all these multiple different gods. So that's the negative reason maybe why we would have been inclined to say, all right, go ahead and have your gods, just leave us have ours. The positive reason would have been what I think is implied in the beginning of Genesis, which is we have revealed to us that this is God. But if you want to get through to God through a multiplicity, as long as you're not hurting us, we're not hurting you. That seems to me to be what's maybe more genuinely going on historically, though I don't have Levinson's extensive research to back me up.
Sure.
But I think it's a hypothesis worth exploring, but somebody else will probably explore it and then I'll read about it.
Sure, so I invite you to look at the Aleinu when you get to the end of the Shabbat service today, in terms of thinking about, oh, we're not saying it's not our way or the highway. I mean, this is an image traditionally that, and it will come, that everyone will say, Adonai, right? Bayom hahu, Yahya Adonai Echad.
And as
that's what
Yeshayahu
everyone
says,
will say.
God's house will be a house of worship for everyone.
Right, and they'll all be worshiped from a very traditional Jewish perspective. And that God that everyone is going to be worshiping from their perspective is Adonai. That's what they're, traditionally, that was the focus. As time has gone on, we've made, shall we say, there's been room made for there, if God is at the top of the mountain, there are different paths to get there, and we're all aiming for the same place. But yeah, but it's, and however we understand God, right? But in this case, we're talking about the God of Israel, the God of creation, the God of revelation, the God of redemption. And this is our connection, the God of our brit, of our covenant. And this is what we carry with us as we go from one generation to the next, but not silently, but we go as we vishinantam, and we repeat this and we teach this diligently to our children and they teach it to their children. I have goosebumps as I say this because I see my children and my grandchildren in front of me. And it's just this amazing image. And and for those without children of their own, those who have taught, those who make a difference in this world, this is how we pass this wonderful and very important message to the next generation. Shabbat shalom.